Record.
Greetings. I'm Anna Ballant, contributing editor at Raven Chronicles Press, a Northwest literary organization that's been around since 1991. Thank you for joining us this evening for Raven Talk, Raven Chronicles online podcast, conversations with writers, artists, and cultural warriors. Today, Lynda Mapes will be talking with Rena Priest about her forthcoming collection of essays, Positively Uncivilized, which is the inaugural winner of Raven Chronicles Keepers of the Fire Prize for Nonfiction. From an Indigenous perspective, Positively Civilized examines the impact of human inhabitants on the planet Earth, alongside personal accounts of the deterioration of salmon populations in the Pacific Northwest and the loss of Indigenous history. The 12 essays in this collection emphasize the necessity of community to overcome the damage done by human socioeconomic and political systems designed to isolate and shame those vulnerable to those unfair systems. About this evening's guests, Lynda Mapes is a staff reporter at the Seattle Times, where she specializes in coverage of the environment and Indigenous cultures and governments. Lynda and two of her colleagues at the Times were finalists for the 2025 Pulitzer Prize for Local Reporting. She has written 7 books and is the winner of the 2021 National Outdoor Book Award and the 2022 Washington State Book Award for Nonfiction for Orca, Shared Waters, Shared Home. Rena Priest is an enrolled member of the Lummi Nation and served as the 6th Washington State Poet Laureate from 2021 to 2023. Her first collection, Patriarchy Blues, won an American Book Award. She has received 2 grants from the National Geographic Society and toured nationally with a variety show called Welcome to Indian Country, organized by Indigenous Performance Productions. Rena Priest lives in Bellingham, Washington. You can learn more at renapriest.com. Okay, so just one quick detail before we get started. After the discussion, we will have time for questions and answers. So use the raise the hand function or speak up with your video turned on. And any comments during the discussion, please put those in chat and Phoebe will be monitoring them. And now, welcome Lynda and Rena.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna. Ai tangan nostalgia o helixen quanasatla tikais hueltanats and a snat chochlamisan. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm very excited to have this conversation with Lynda, and I'll just go ahead and start by sharing a little bit from the first essay, from the title essay, Positively Uncivilized. Think back, way back. What are some of the first stories you can remember being told? One of my very first memories, and possibly the reason I am who I am today, is that I remember a story. It starts out, 1 fish, 2 fish, red fish, blue fish, black fish, blue fish, old fish, new fish. This one has a little car, this one has a little star. Say, what a lot of fish there are. This is the story where I learned that I love words, fish, and rhyming. This is a good story. I remember knowing that if I brought that book to my mom, she would sit beside me on the couch and do this amazing thing with her voice, like singing, which later I learned is called rhyming. Back then, I thought it was a superpower. I still like good rhymes. I still think that they're a superpower. All along, I've been gathering stories like this about the world and telling them to myself. Of course, not all stories are as nice as the one about the fish and the rhymes. When we were kids, if we were being too wild, one of my parents would shout, "Quit acting like a bunch of little savages." If we left a cup on the counter, toys on the living room floor, or a damp towel next to the hamper, we would hear, "I just cleaned this house. It looks like a bunch of dirty little Indians live here." If we were being dumb in the grocery store or rowdy in a restaurant, they would lean over and hiss, act civilized, acknowledging that we weren't truly civilized, but we could at least pretend until we got to the car. On the one hand, their name calling was a way of taking power away from those slurs and attitudes toward our tribal identity. When your family who loves you very much tells you to stop acting like a savage, it becomes a way of saying, check yourself. On the other hand, it's still a story about how the world sees us as dirty and positively uncivilized. Perhaps being told this story by our parents prepares us to encounter it out in the hard white world that doesn't love us and where the story originated and in some places is still being told around the dinner table whenever the subject of Indians arises. Or on X, apparently. This story was passed down like a curse through several generations. I believe my ancestors learned it in Catholic boarding schools where they were taken as tiny children to be raised far from the love of their families. Something you should know about Indian boarding schools is that their creation came on the heels of the abolishment of slavery. Is it a coincidence that American elites and factories needed a new workforce while they were taking Indian children and teaching them to be laborers and household servants? I doubt it. When my grandmother was 6, she and her sister were scooped up by government agents and taken in the back of a cattle truck to Chamawa boarding school, 300 miles from their home. My grandmother always changed the subject whenever I asked her about it, so I remember going to interview my grandmother's older sister about the boarding school for a writing assignment. My aunt said that when the people came from the school, it seemed going with them meant they would be better off. She said it was hard times at Lummi back then. No food, no work, no hope. The people were hungry. In hindsight, we understand that it was hard times on the reservation for the same reasons back then as today, because the American experiment was designed to disenfranchise non-white communities by way of unfair laws and the soul-crushing abuses of racism. So Auntie told me the story of how at the school they were fed and taught how to sew, and they learned the Bible stories, stories that convinced them that the best they could do in this life was to hang their hopes on heaven in the next. Kill the Indian to save the man was the slogan that set the boarding school machine in motion. It was a machine aimed at cultural genocide. But a thing of beauty is a joy forever. So many of our beautiful cultural stories, beliefs, and customs survived. We have a tradition at Lummi called the Prayer of Never-Ending Gratitude, where all throughout the day you are thankful for everything you encounter. My niece made a little song to help her remember. Haishka, 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 iasatsakwa. It means thank you, thank you, thank you for the beautiful water. Iasatsashriam, iasatsasquile, iasatsanostralia, the beautiful story, the beautiful day, the beautiful relatives, and on and on and on. You say thank you for everything, the birds singing at daybreak, maple seeds helicoptering down from trees, the dance of the cottonwood shimmering silver in the breeze. You say thank you for everything, and the prayer attaches itself to your heartbeat and continues throughout your life and the lives of your children, and so on, forever. And the word for heart in our language is sala. The word for hands in our language is solace. So your hands do the work of your heart, which is gratitude. You put good feelings into everything you make and everything you do. Thank you for the sunrise. Thank you for the breath I make. Thank you for my life. It is a beautiful story to tell yourself about the world. As far as a way of being in the world, it signals to me the peak of refinement and civility. So that's just the first couple of pages of the collection, and I think it introduces the ideas that sort of continue throughout and are kind of shifted around and looked at from different angles.
That's a perfect introduction. Rena, I want to first start by congratulating you on this remarkable collection of essays. I
You.
couldn't put it down. I found it brave, truth-telling. It's honest, it's painful, it's funny, it's beautiful. More than anything, I think it's essential. It's just an absolutely spectacular collection. It's small, but mighty.
Thank you.
I think the thing you brought out to start us with is really rather perfect because it there's a lot of that kind of double vision, if you will, in the book, where you bring out something beautiful and you bring out something really hard about being an Indian person in dominant white society. Very often these are juxtaposed even in the same essay. And I found reading this book that I was very often thrown off, destabilized, unsettled from something that I thought I knew or something I'd never even thought to think of. And I was grateful for that. I felt changed by reading your book. I want to give you an example, and I'm going to read just a little bit. This is on page 23. This is Defenses of Peace in the Biosphere Reserve. So what's going on here, dear listeners, is Rena has found herself on a fellowship leave in a beautiful location. It's a pretty house with a beautiful view, and she's there in this circumstance. And yet she finds herself, not twirling around saying, "Oh, pretty, pretty me," but rather she's uncomfortable, and she's uncomfortable because of where she is. And I want to explain why I think this is such an important passage. She says, "The days pass, and of course I'm happy and grateful to be here, but it is an uneasy happiness, a gratitude existing on the same coin of grief. As an Indigenous person, to be in a beautiful home in a beautiful place is never a simple enjoyment. In such a house built on the homelines of displaced peoples, colonizer violence is always standing in the corner, trying not to be noticed amid the charming architecture skillfully aimed at highlighting the landscape to make one feel as though they are a participant in nature rather than a spectator, occasionally cheering from the luxury box." I love that little twist of the knife there. "In the most beautiful places, it is difficult to be fully at peace because I am always aware that the people who belong to the place, who lived here because of its beauty, cared for the place for thousands of years because of its beauty, had spiritual beliefs and practices that were fused with the well-being of this place because of its innate beauty and function. I am always aware that those original people didn't simply leave because new people arrived on their shores. These places, all up and down this coast, every watershed, every nook and cranny of hospitable, desirable land, through violence or threat of violence, were taken." So I would love it if you could reflect for us just a little bit, Rena, on what you're going for here and bringing this to us, to your audience. What you're sharing this in such a generous voice. It's very interesting to me how you, in your book, bring forward these very hard truths, and I want to bring up some more examples as we go along. But you do it from a place of generosity. I experience it as you want me to learn something, you want me to understand something, and you even instruct in one of your other essays, please sit with it. Don't shut down. Don't run away. Don't leave me here alone, holding this as I've had to for so long. Could you talk a little bit about your stance, the stance you took in these essays and as a writer?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny to me when sometimes people come and share what they think they know about Indian country, like, oh, the fish are going all extinct because the Indians didn't take care of the resource, things like that. And I just want to say, wait a minute, there's so many layers of, what happened with the dams and what happened with fish farms and what happened with like just terrible mismanagement over the last 200 years that had absolutely nothing to do with Indigenous peoples. But that's just one example of like what, when people will come to me with their public school education and share what they think they know about Indigenous peoples. And so I wanted somehow to correct that and gently. Nobody likes to be corrected or told, oh, what you actually learned is very, kind of wrong or backwards or is a half truth. And so I do recognize the need to always be, somewhat tender with hard truths, but also that they need to be said. Um, and I think my background in writing poetry is helpful in this way. I came across a really great quote by Yeats, W.B. Yeats, and he says something along the lines of, Politics is when you're arguing with another person. Poetry is when you're arguing with yourself. And so, when you as an Indigenous person educated in public schools and then also educated around dinner tables and in community gatherings, you have these opposing truths and these stories, these half stories that are expanded upon. And I've just, it's my life has been trying to reconcile those stories and find where I can correct that record in any way that I can.
Well, you do it brilliantly, and I also love that you show up as, directly with the vertical pronoun I, and you don't shy away from engaging me directly as a reader. Please don't run away. Don't shut down. Don't. And you acknowledge the fact that that very often happens. And I think about how painful it must be to need to say these things, actually. And you talk about that too in one of your essays. Like, I'm sick of this. I wish I could just write pretty, and about pretty things, but actually that's not the job and it's not the deal. And so here I am, and please sit with me and stay with me, and don't make me carry it alone. I thought that was just very courageous, right in the public space, writing as an essayist. So I thought that was just really strong, and I really haven't seen anything like it. The other thing that I really found so valuable in your work was the way your research brought forward for us direct testimony from your ancestors. You dug into the record and you brought forward instances, painful instances of things they witnessed. I'm curious to ask about that work. Were you digging in the archives? Were you mining family letters? Some of this material is just, devastating to encounter, really, honestly, the waste of fish. Um, that was a really tough one to read. How did you do that work? How did you gather that material? And how did you make decisions about what to use?
Yeah. So I relied heavily on printed things that people have given me over the years, court documents. There's a collection called Lummi Elders Speak that is in the archives that was collected in the early 80s from elders who, were alive at the turn of the century and witnessing the early devastation to the fishery. And, when Bellingham actually was the site of the largest cannery of in the world in
Yes.
the late 1800s. And so, at that time, our Lummi people were not allowed to be on the water. It was, despite what was guaranteed and promised in the treaty, it was enforced that, it was illegal for us to be out there fishing. And so people went to work in the canneries, and they had to see this devastation of our sacred food day after day after day. And so, sometimes things just kind of came to me in as a part of like me sharing out in the public some of the stories and poems that I have written in about this topic. And one time I remember it was so powerful and so moving. An audience member came up after my reading, and she said, "My dad lived in Bellingham. He grew up. And she was an elderly woman, and she said he was a little boy in Bellingham, and he asked his dad about what was going on out in the middle of the bay because there was like something out there, and you couldn't really see because it was in the middle of Bellingham Bay, but there were birds swarming all over it." And his dad said, "Well, they used to dump the fish that they couldn't process from the canneries out, and now, so that it doesn't wash on shore and cause everything to, stink." He said they pile them up on these barges and they tow it out into the middle of the bay to rot,
Oh my.
and just in heaps, in mountainous heaps. And she told me that, and I just felt myself kind of almost go numb. And it was just really because that was the second part of the story, right? Like my ancestors, or well, the elder from Lummi and Elders Speak tells the story of them washing on the shore, and then to have that second part of the story about what they ended up doing after, to mitigate that so that it was not in the public view. To have that second part of the story through just like the oral tradition from a stranger, a non-native. It was really moving and difficult. So, things just kind of would, when people find out what work you're doing, they'll say, "Oh, I have something for you," and they'll give you
Right.
a document or they'll share a tape. Um, I just got a tape actually from an interview, one of the last interviews given from a tribal elder from a total stranger. I've still never met this person. She sent it to me in the mail, but
Wow.
um, yeah. So in a way, being willing to speak about these things means that more people will share their knowledge and share what they know in the
That's
hopes that I continue to speak. So I feel beholden to that.
that's beautiful. I'm glad you do. I wanted to mention that one of the other things you did in this book that I think is so valuable is you brought out new layers to history we think we know that I wasn't aware of, and just whole new aspects that enrich our community's understanding. I'm referring here to page 38, where you speak about the Bolt decision. Now, the Bolt decision from 1974, as we've all been taught, is when the federal judge affirmed the treaty right of Indian people to their fish, later finally affirmed by the US Supreme Court. We had the 50-year anniversary of that this year in 2024. And I've always celebrated the Volt decision and talked about it as something to celebrate. But you brought out some nuance here that I'd never thought of. I'm going to read for just a moment. With the Bolt decision, we were thrust into capitalism and the marketplace. We came to see the gift of the salmon not as a sacrifice supporting an ancient and sacred relationship, but as a cash stream to which we were entitled, not by nature, but by federal obligation. When we agreed to interfere with their journey by raising salmon in hatcheries, this too is when we let colonial laws dupe us into giving up our sacred covenant with the salmon in exchange for a way out of the crushing poverty that had long been imposed by a socioeconomic system designed to keep Indigenous people in constant state of financial vulnerability. This made me wish, Rena, that you would take on a whole project of a book about hatcheries and this intertwined complicity that we've all been pushed into with hatcheries. The lie we were told, oh, that's okay, destroy the habitat because we just make these fish, it'll be great, you can have your cake and eat it too. And you really take that on in this essay, and you talk also about how the tribes, and I never knew this either, were told in the Bolt decision that in return for that, they also had to make fish in hatcheries. I never knew that. So I'd love to hear you on this painful history and present reality. I mean, we're in a place now where in the Columbia River and elsewhere, like 90% of the fish are hatchery fish. And if we were to turn them off, the cold Stromichton would have nothing to eat, and neither would Indian people have anything to catch. So, and yet those fish are dyers, right? They're not coming back either because they need habitat. We don't have habitat. So whether you're made in a hatchery or you're naturally born, it's not working for us. So here we find ourselves, and I
Yeah.
would love to hear you on this journey
Yeah.
you made.
The sacredness of that journey, like biologically, scientifically, what that journey is for a salmon going downstream, it is like crucial to their development, right? And I learned so much about it when I was reading submissions from people to put the poetry collection together. I Sing the Salmon Home. Particularly, Judith Roche had a beautiful long poem about, the journey of the salmon. And in it, she talks about when they're smolts, they face upstream and they take in all of that information, the smells and the, information about predators and location and what they're doing. They're taking it all in as they go downstream to the ocean. So when they come home, they have all of that information coming back. And that's important. And you think about like what you learn from your environment. We don't do that anymore. And how we're educated, we just go and we punch a clock and many of us sit in a cubicle for 8 hours straight. And that I feel like that's what we imposed upon salmon and hatcheries. They don't have that journey going downstream, experiencing the beautiful world. They just go round and around and around and around and around and around, and then we let them out, and they're like, why don't they come back? It's so weird.
Yeah.
Well, they do come back, but also I remember when I was doing the article on the orca on Tokatai that's in here towards the end. I was at the hatchery in Leavenworth taking pictures. It's a federal hatchery. And I was just thinking about this and I thought, okay, I'm going to go into town, into Leavenworth, and just kind of feeling heavy. And I went to the ice cream shop to kind of give myself a little lift. And what do you know? The guy who runs the ice cream shop worked at the hatchery in
Of course
Leavenworth
he
for
does.
like 20 years as a biologist. And he said, I couldn't handle it anymore. That, we'd try to breed these hardier and hardier stocks, and they just came back in smaller and smaller numbers. And so he quit and he went and started an ice cream shop. But the idea that we're pumping that there's no harm from pumping 5 billion hatchery fish into the ecosystem every year, that's not going to like take a toll on our wild stock is just crazy.
Of course.
But how do you stop this machine? It's so funded, it's so well funded. And uh, there are instances of that same question over and over in this collection. How do you stop this machine?
Yes.
And I kind of wish that there's a preface that I wrote, like a long preface to my poetry collection, Dancing to the Ticking of the Doomsday Clock, which sort of could partner with this book pretty well. But the response is that, until 1855, which is sort of around the same time as treaties, or maybe it was 1858, I can't remember the exact year, but same time as treaty times, that's when synchronized time was introduced to the world. And it was done in one day at an international convention. And everyone said, okay, we're going to all be on the same clock, and here you go. And so we've been marching to the same clock ever since. And so, if an idea like that could change everybody's lives as significantly as that did, could take hold in one day, then we have the agency, the human power to be able to make changes that could take hold um, in a similar way, but in a positive way, and shift everything towards greater balance. It's just a matter of, I guess the getting the right people in the room to make that decision, and everybody starts going, right? So there is hope, to not be hopeless. And that's what I kind of try to do in these essays too, is present the hard problem and then maybe not present a solution, but present another way of thinking about it that is rooted in how we used to think about how we used to think about it. We didn't think of things as natural resources. We thought of them as our relations.
I think the other thing you do that's very skillful and effective is the use of humor and taking on the tropes and the myths very directly. And, I had a lot of fun reading these parts in the book. I want to share one of my favorite parts in the whole book. So this is on page 55. This is from a chapter with a wonderful name, Desire in the City of Subdued Excitement. And here Rena is explaining why she was jonesing for a pair of cowboy boots for Christmas, which I got to say took me by surprise. Here she goes. Here's how she explains it. Call it cultural appropriation. I want to dress up and play at cowboy culture. I desire the power available and the kind of self-assurance represented in the cowboy legacy of the American West. The kind of self-assurance required to swagger in, take what I want from this world and feel 100% entitled to it. Entitled to do genocide, entitled to cause the extinction of people, their customs, culture, food sources, extinction of lifeways, extinction of entire populations of fish, animals, fuck them all. If I want it, I'm taking it. And if you're in my way, you can get the fuck out or die. Howdy, y'all. Yee-haw. Okay, Rena. I mean, that was just spectacular. I mean, you sum it up there. It's only one paragraph. I think you know, you talk also at the end of this essay, you say, when you bring this out sometimes with your people of European descent, and there's this retaliatory history lessons of, oh well, this happened in Europe or whatever. It's kind of this, oh well, too bad, better luck next time thing. And you say this wonderfully honest thing. You say, I see this type of response as attempted denial of the continued oppression of indigenous people by the dominant culture of which the lesson giver is a part. Don't resist. I know it's hard. Try not to be agitated by what I'm saying. Agitation is a form of excitement. We subdue that. Just sit with it. See if it changes you inside. See if it changes your heart's desire. Now that's deeply subversive writing done with the most powerful tool of all, which is humor, and also a very direct approach to the reader. So I thought that was spectacular. And I'm just curious, what kind of response are you hoping for from this writing? What are you looking for? What do you want to have happen by bringing this out into the world?
Well, I think that there's something to suddenly being. Oh, there's a quote that I really like. I think it's James Thurber, but it's been a long time. I'll have to find it. And he says, "Humor is when we're told the truth quicker and more directly than we're accustomed to," or something like that.
Yeah.
And I've thought about that a lot. Like because I used to just say things and people would think that it was funny. They would laugh and I'd be like, why do they think I'm funny? Now I totally kind of do it on purpose. But when I was much younger, I was always surprised at how people laugh. Now I try to do it on purpose to get that, disarm people. And I do that because in a way, if you make somebody laugh, then you've like broken the surface. Um, and you've also broken the tension. And so there's like now vulnerability and openness, and whatever you're saying can now be received. And it has to be examined like, oh, why did I laugh? Like I have this poem that I used to open that show, Welcome to Indian Country, with, and it ends, had all these pretty little images about, tribal culture that I think like people, I'm also fully aware of people's stereotypes of like, you know. So I play with that, and at the end I say, "Now give us back our land," and then people laugh, and people have asked, "Why did I laugh at that?" And I say because you know that it's true and it's right, and but it's also something that you're not accustomed to encountering so suddenly. But also from a craft point of view, it's something that they were lulled into, like and thinking that things were going to go one way and then they went another way. And so almost,
Exactly.
almost trying to bore them to the point where they think, okay, how long is she going to talk about this? And then when you say something maybe a little mildly radical, it feels, yeah, disarming, I guess.
I think that's right. And um, that's a really good word, disarming, because the experience of reading your essays was that for me. I mean, we've all heard these myths and tropes, and it's almost like swimming in water. You're not aware of it because you're swimming in it. It's just part of the American experience, so called. And I love it when, for instance, you know, I love it when I'm taken by surprise like that. So thank you. And here's another one. Okay. Another one of my favorites in that genre, which is on page 63. And you say, this is another one that takes on a trope, and this is a really sacred one. I know a white poet who shares a poem about his great grandmother who was an early colonizer in Montana. He calls her a pioneer and talks about her bravery in settling a hostile and unknown landscape, about how she had to be self-reliant in order to survive. You got to realize, Rena, I'd read every one of the Little House on the Prairie books, every single. It takes everything in me not to call bullshit and tell him that she wasn't self-reliant. She was relying on the bounty and abundance of the earth. She wasn't alone in a hostile landscape. There were indigenous peoples living there for thousands of years before she arrived. Perhaps she didn't know it, though, because they lived there in a low impact kind of way. Would it have killed her to learn those ways instead of insisting on her own way, a way that responded to the world as one responds to hostility, by stamping it the fuck down? Here is my very favorite sentence in the whole collection. No, the settlers didn't settle anything. They unsettled it. So that's just a lance that you've thrown, or flaming arrow that's going in the door. The reason I find that so powerful is this settler trope. We settled it, we quieted it, we made it better, we la da da da. You're like, no, there was a beautiful and perfect harmonious order here that you unsettled, and that we are now reaping the whirlwind harvest of that destruction to this minute until we can come back to something more like the balance that was here for thousands of years with the original knowledge systems were basically cooked. So that was just so skillfully done, and I just wondered what it's like for you to write a line like that. Are you just feeling like, there, I said it, or what are you feeling when you write that?
Oh, I felt like yeah, like there I said it because I remember going to his reading, like he invited me specifically, and I thought that was nice. And I like this poet a lot, so then there's like so, there's something there. It was like he wanted me to hear how good they were. Um,
Oh, yeah.
his ancestor. And I just remember sitting there thinking,
Oh, no.
oh no, yeah, oh no. And then of course he's like, what did you think? And I was like,
Actually, no, no. The settlers didn't settle anything. They unsettled it. That's just such a beautiful way to say it.
and so, you sit with that for a long time too. I think a lot of writing, it either comes for me, it either comes from wanting to like celebrate something that I'm just in awe of, that I just like, oh man, everybody has to know about this. It's amazing. It's so beautiful. Look at it. Look at this. So my writing comes from that place, or it comes from like something needs to be said, like just kind of feeling like that. And then um, I think the longer that I delay saying something, the more when it's done, it's like I just scratched an itch, just
Yeah,
just
yeah,
relief. Like I don't
yeah.
have to carry that anymore. And so
But
yeah.
that ignorance is also baked right into canons of law. I mean, in BC right now, there are Indigenous people that are fighting for their right and title in the Supreme Court, and they're fighting against a canon of terra nullius, right? There was nobody here, there was nothing here. So what's the problem? We just started using it. That's all. When in fact they were disrupting forest gardens and places with culturally modified trees, and they've brought in bark strip trees as testimony. The Nutala people have to say, okay, so explain this 300-year-old bark scar. This
Yeah.
idea that there was nobody and nothing here has been so deeply harmful and even baked into legal defense of the existing order of land theft. So it's such an important statement that you make. It's such a wonderfully, deliciously subversive statement. And I truly thank you for it. Uh, this time I knew would go very fast. There were other things I wanted to bring up, but I just feel I really want to hear you on the captive orca and a chance for our redemption. This is a terribly bitter, sad part of the book and essential reading once again. And you very directly bring out the parallel histories between the capture era and the capture era of the Native children in our nation in these boarding schools. And of course, your chief Salik brought that forward to us as a teaching, and I think a lot of people really want to resist that. They want to see this as harmless entertainment. SeaWorld is still making money off it. The southern resident orcas have never recovered from taking a third of the pods, including all the youngest, because they were the cheapest to ship. Uh,
Mhm.
Ted Griffin lives and breathes today, the captor who took a lot of those whales in Puget Sound.
And
I
he's
was
not sorry.
right. No, exactly. And you went to see her. You went to see Tokutai in Miami, and I really want to hear you on that. What in the world was that like? And the fact that she came to you and you spoke, she spoke, you sang. I would love it if you could talk to us about what you experienced and what that was like for you.
Oh, it was really horrific. It was really hard. It was so hard. I think I had a lot, like I struggled a lot during this time when I was writing this piece, particularly, kind of leading up to going to see her, knowing that I was going to have to go see her and knowing like about the dimensions of her captivity. This this article was like a 7,000 word, it was a long one, and then it got shortened a lot for publication because it ended up going in the print issue, which I appreciated because it reached more readers that way. But we did have to kind of get rid of a lot so that we could, squeeze it into that space. But one of the things I read about also was prisoners in solitary confinement and how it's akin to torture, Um, and to think of her in that space was really hard. But also thinking about, and I don't think I put this in there either. It's been a while since I read it. I'd have to go back and you know how like it was in the original, the long one, but it was about when I was a child, we went to SeaWorld. And I remember thinking that they came in, that the orcas, because you couldn't see them before they started the show. They were somewhere else, maybe behind a little wall in the pool or something. But in my mind as a child, this is how real and autonomous they were to me even then. I thought that they must have swum through a tunnel to be in that pool, and that when they were done, they were going to swim back out into the ocean, that they were there to see us and show us, like how beautiful and astounding they were, and that they were going to go back. And then, like to kind of like grow up and then have this, awareness that no, they spend their whole lives in these little tiny spaces. Um, I think even if you told any child that, I mean, maybe not. I don't know. If you had told me that, it would have like destroyed the whole, I would have been like, this place needs to burn
Exactly.
immediately. Um, but uh, so anyway, I got a little off track there, but it was emotional for me. It was emotional to write that piece, and then also to see the way that it was done with such just, disregard, and that called up the parallels to missing and murdered Indigenous women, the way, our women are taken or disappeared, community members from tribes are just disappeared, and nobody ever goes looking for them, and how upsetting and terrible that is. It there are just a lot of um, parallels in how we regard like beautiful autonomous beings, and they're treated without that respect for their beautiful sentience, um, for our beautiful sentience, and for the reason that it was called a chance for our redemption, I think, because at that time she could have come home.
Exactly.
She could have come home,
Yeah.
and
I think
she
one of
did.
the things I loved about this writing that you did in this piece, it was so disciplined. I mean, you easily could have just, melted into maudlin or just ranted or something, but I love the fact that you included the example of getting the math class tasked on figuring out, okay, let's break it down. If you're this size and you're in a pen that size, what is that equivalent to for a person? Okay, that's 170 square feet. So basically you're locked in a bathroom for the rest of your life. And I thought that was brilliant and much more powerful than just a less disciplined accounting would have been. And that happens over and over again in your writing. You use um, these very trenchant pieces of research to bring forward how much fish was wasted. We saw it happen. Here's an elder speaking to it directly. This is how small her pen was. I mean, I think that your work is so powerful because you bring to it so many different elements that as a reader, you find yourself confronted over and over again. But I always also feel taken by the hand that you're doing this because you're doing it as a gift, actually. There's a gift energy behind this tremendous body of work that you put together. So we've been talking for 40 minutes. Probably people have questions. It's very hard to let you go. I do have one more question for you, which is what's next? Because I want to read it, whatever it is. What's next? What are you working on now?
So I most recently pitched an essay about AI. I was listening to the godfather of AI, Jeffrey Hutchins. I think that's his last name, or Jeffrey Hinton. I can't remember. Anyway, he has a Nobel Prize in physics for his work on consciousness and like computing or whatever. But he's very fascinating, and he talks about, the short-term risks or the short-term threats posed by AI being, human happiness as it relates to purpose, as we are all phased out of like, our livelihoods. But the long-term effects, potential threats of AI freakishly parallel what indigenous populations of the Western Hemisphere experienced with colonization. So they're afraid that what AI is going to do is, you know, what was done to indigenous peoples. Uh, so it's kind of interesting. I wanted to write that article. I pitched it. I got the response the day before yesterday. They said it's too opiniony. But I was going to totally draw on research from I can't think of his name right now, the Harvard professor that studied happiness. He's been doing he has now taken over the longest running study in history, I think, ever. And it's about human happiness at Harvard. And it's interesting. His work is really interesting. What they found is that the key like commonality is relationships, like healthy, deep social relationships is the one factor, the universal factor that can be attributed to people feeling like they have happy, satisfying lives. And so, thinking about the purposelessness issue that could be posed by AI, that really the answer is just, be with your people and cultivate those deep, meaningful relationships with your people. So that was the aim of that article. I'm still thinking about writing it. I don't know if I want to try to pitch it. I also have been thinking about self-publishing my poetry collection that I mentioned earlier. That one has been around. It's been in front of more than 40 people, and it's been rejected 40 times for all kinds of crazy reasons. Um, the most recent of which said that I'm not in conversation with contemporary poetics. I thought, wow.
Oh,
And then it said that I'm more in conversation with the AIM movement. And I thought, okay, because that's not important anymore, right? Like that's not contemporary. We don't need to worry about that.
oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it's just been a rough road with that collection. I don't know what's wrong with it. But
There's nothing wrong with it.
I was
There's
gonna say,
nothing,
I think
there
there's
is nothing wrong with it.
thank
You know what
you.
I mean? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well,
So I've been thinking about self-publishing it and just putting it on my website and saying, donation button, but we'll see. We'll see what happens.
don't give up.
Thank
I,
you.
I just want to say one thing here. Uh, fabulous. Everybody was fabulous. And should we open up to the questions? Any questions?
And thank you, Linda, so much for those questions. I
Yes, I
feel
mean, I
so
talked to you about this book for days and days and days. It's a fabulous piece of work. Thank you for
thank
writing
you.
it and bringing it into the world.
It's just such an honor to be interviewed by like a seasoned interviewer. I was really excited about that coming in. I thought,
I was
oh,
excited to
this
get
is
to talk
gonna
to you about your work. It's incredible
this is gonna be great. It was great. Thank you.
for me too.
I wanted to jump in if it's okay. Great to see you, Rena. I haven't read this yet, and I so look forward to it. And I just wanted to know, do you have any readings planned that Seattle or Bellingham or in the area? Because it sounds like it would be amazing to hear all the some of the essays in person.
Yeah, so far I have our launch is scheduled for Hugo House on September 5th, and that'll be myself and the other winner from the fiction category of the Keeper of the Fire Award. And thank you, Phoebe, and thank you, Anna, too, for hosting this event. I really appreciate it. But yeah, that will be September 5th, and there's one on September 29th that is hosted by it's a partnership between the North Cascades Institute and Third Place Books, and that'll be at Third Place Books on Ravenna. And then I have one in October at Village Books. I can't remember which day. I think maybe October 11th. Um, the PR or the promo will be going out for that pretty soon. And that one I'm kind of excited about. I'll be reading with Caskey Russell, who is the Dean of Fairhaven College. He has a new novel coming out about based on the Tlingit folklore.
Cool.
Any other questions, comments? No?
Yeah, I've got one question. What have you, when you pose the idea of, give us our land back, and which is something that I was thinking about. I mean, that goes way back to this land is our land. And I can't remember the person's name who added a trailer to that. I don't know if you're familiar with that phrase that's this land was stole by you from me.
Oh, yeah.
So I mean, this goes way, way back. And when you say, I can't remember how that came up in the conversation. I think you were kind of lulling someone into something and then gave them a little bit of a sucker punch. How do people respond to that? Because I mean, there's a lot of talk about reparations and stuff like that, but I've never heard of it beyond the acknowledgments, beyond land acknowledgments. Is there any traction in taking that further that you're aware of?
Yeah, I mean there's a movement, there's the land back movement, and they work with communities actively to see where, land can be repatriated to tribes. And there's been some success. There's been, actually just last year, I think it was just last year, the largest return of land in history was made to the Klamath tribe,
That's
and
right.
it's going to restore more than 300, is it 300?
1,000 acres.
1,000 acres of land to, yeah, 300,000 acres of land to, or salmon habitat.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's fantastic. I mean, and there needs to be so much more of it. It is happening little bit by little bit.
yeah. And so,
That's right there in Bellingham, they just got a nice big old chunk of downtown property gifted to them. So that was a cool land back and urban land back. We don't see much of that.
yeah, yeah,
It's a little, it's starting. It's not enough, but it's happening, and there should be more of it.
yeah. And every win shows that it's possible,
That's right.
And
And
I
it's going
think
on
that,
all over the country.
yeah, it's really beautiful to see it when it happens, and when it happens in a good way, and the community generally supports it. And then like what happens with like what happened with the Klamath is often what happens is that it's restored to be a viable habitat for, non-human communities as well. And so it reintegrates it, puts it back intact. And so that's when people see that, I think maybe there's some appreciation to it too. It builds greater appreciation for it. And originally, I wrote that poem for the show was called Welcome to Indian Country, but I wrote it in response to sometimes being asked to do land acknowledgments.
Oh,
And
yeah.
tried to learn about whose land I was on whenever I was going to do this land acknowledgement. And I would learn about the history. And I thought, I wonder if the people really know, like, what happened here, all the crazy ways that the land was taken, or, just like, just it's shocking sometimes, like the stories are violent, or it's just unbelievable how, like, underhanded the dealing was, that enabled people who were not there, who were not indigenous, to settle the place, to move on to the place and do what they would. So I would share those stories, and then I thought, people would say, "Well, what can we do?" And sometimes after, I've been asked that a lot too. What can we do? And I always thought, well, just give it back. Just give it back.
Yeah.
So, that's the simplest thing. Um, And at the very least, restore it to be its most productive and healthy, and to its most healthy state, I think. Lee Miracle was one that, said when people would ask her, what can we do? That was her response. Like, just because that we're stewards of the land, women are the keepers of the water and men are keepers of the land. And it doesn't say just Stalo women are the keepers of the water, Stalo men are keepers of the land. It says women or men. And so that means you too, right? And so I always loved that in her writing.